This meeting is being recorded.
Hello to everyone and welcome to today's virtual event. My name is Tanner Swift and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm excited to introduce a couple incredible speakers for you today, but before I hand the mic over to our presenters, I do have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation. Today's virtual event will be recorded and made available on demand after the live session, and the playback will also be available on YouTube for rewatch as well. We will provide you with some of those details through a post-webinar discussion thread on the Cisco Learning Network. We'd also love to hear from you during today's presentation. During the session, if you have a question for our presenters, you can submit those through the Q&A panel here on WebEx, where we will answer your questions, as well as address them during the Q&A portion of today's event. If you experience any audio issues, we ask that you try to rejoin the session, and if to no avail, please use the call-in number displayed on the chat screen. I'll post that once again momentarily. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming our first speaker, Boris. Boris, right over to you.
Hi, thank you, Tanner, and welcome everyone to this webinar where we will be talking about Meraki licensing and understanding Meraki licensing, which has over the years become more complicated than I would like it to be, and we will see why. But hopefully, some of that will, we'll sort and resolve some of those things out. My name is Boris Doshin. I'm a solutions architect with Cisco Customer Experience team covering Meraki. I first joined Cisco as a systems engineer, although I was covering service provider portfolio. And then after taking some time away from Cisco, joined back through Meraki and worked several years as a trainer and a content developer, and then moved over back to Cisco proper, as we call it, with CX. I love talking about Meraki. I really enjoy how it resolves and solves the issues that we have as network engineers. So I'm still a big fan of the platform, and there's no need for me to stop being a fan. And today with me, I also have Nesli as well, who will be here on a standby and might be helping us with some of the questions. Nesli, would you like to just briefly say hi?
Sure. Yes. Hi everyone. Actually need to update the session. So I'm also a solution architect working with stories. So I've been actually handling on the enterprise side, Cali Center, Thousand Eyes, and recently catching up on Meraki.
This is so my fault. I didn't change your title. I'm so sorry. It's because I used a template and it left over. I really apologize. Anyway, thank you. So just a reminder, Tanner already said this. We have a Q&A section and the chat section. First of all, if you find a chat section, maybe just say hi to me and let me know where you're dialing in from today, which part of the world. I am based in Barcelona in Spain, so it's getting a bit late today for me, but that's okay. I'm glad to be here. Please do let me know where you're coming from. I'm still waiting for people to let me know. You also, you do have a Q&A section. So if you have any questions, it's a bit easier if you send your questions there and we'll start to get those answered as well. Hi, Karsten from Germany, Diego from Prague, Gulf Shores, Argentina, Valencia, Netherlands. Okay, I really shouldn't be complaining about my longer, my late day. Cool, so thank you everyone for being with us. So let's move on. So what I'm hoping that you will get out of this session is really three main things. I want you to walk away understanding the different Meraki licensing models. There are 2.5, unfortunately, but we'll sort all of that out and clear it up. I'm hoping that you will be able to determine which one is the best for you, understand whether you want to migrate from one to the other or not, and then also understand what is that migration process from one licensing model to the other if you choose to do so. Okay, so as you all might know, Meraki is a cloud-first networking platform. It has hardware across access points, cellular gateways, security appliances, Ethernet switches, endpoint management as well, and then the smart cameras too. Now, unlike many other networking solutions, as I said, this is a cloud-first offering. So all of the configuration, management, monitoring comes hand in hand with Meraki dashboard, which is a GUI that you access through a web page, and this large portion of the Meraki solution is hosted in the Meraki cloud, and the hardware you have deployed, as well as the cloud, Meraki cloud, work together to bring all of these amazing features. Now, as for most products, that does mean that you also have to have a license for the hardware that you have purchased. And the license enforcement on Meraki is really, really strict because the devices, a single hardware device in itself is not the full solution. There's really no way of you to just configuring that device just by plugging into a port. That is not possible. You need to use the cloud portion. And therefore, this licensing enforcement is really, well, it's just, you can't escape it. So you do need to have the licenses for all of the devices. They are an all-inclusive license, so you don't have to worry about some add-ons. It comes with the access to the centralized management for networking, for visibility, for control. Seamless firmware and security updates are included with the license as well. So the new features, as they get released, they will be added very often free of charge. We do have some licensing tiers, which we will talk about later, but in large, even if you stick to the same licensing tier, we keep adding new and new features to these devices, and you will get them free of the charge. And also, the way that these get delivered to you, which are through automated firmware upgrades through the cloud, makes this much easier. The license also includes 24/7 enterprise support. Meraki runs separate support from the rest of the Cisco, as you may know. Currently, Meraki supports 2 licensing models. Well, 2.5. It supports the co-termination licensing model, which is probably the one that most of you are on. And we now have a new licensing model, which is called subscription licensing. Now, there is a third licensing model, which is called per device licensing. It is a licensing model that is no longer pushed. We no longer recommend it. There are customers who are on it still, but we don't actively encourage customers anymore to move over to it. So let me kind of break this down a bit. Well, actually, before I do that, so there's still that chat option here that you kindly told me where you're from. Does any of you know which licensing model you currently use on your organization? It would be cool to see, kind of what comes up and what's the majority here. But let me just kind of give you some history of this so that this is kind of a bit clearer. The co-termination model is kind of the base model. It's the default model that you get assigned to when you bring up a Meraki organization. It's what most customers use. They just choose to stay on it. Now, co-termination model, as we saw, had some drawbacks. The biggest drawback for me of a co-termination model is this inability for you to decide when the license is going to start ticking. So what happens on a co-termination model is that you place an order with Cisco, with the partner, and you will get your order confirmation number, which you can use to then claim devices and licenses to Meraki dashboard. The license starts ticking at that point in time when you're on code termination. There's no other option. So the license will start ticking usually before the devices are even get to your premises. Now, what we say about this is that sure, this is true, but what happens is that you get the ability to add the devices, the licenses, start configuring them at that point, and whilst the delivery of the devices is going on, you can configure everything, have everything ready, plug everything in once they're there, and you're up and running. So in a way, you are using some of this time anyway. So that was one of the biggest drawbacks, still what we were getting a lot of complaints about. And so we did have this understanding that we do need to improve this in a way. And so we came up with a new licensing model, which is called per device licensing. Now, per device licensing, one of the great things about it was that you could choose and delay the start of when your license started ticking. And so you could postpone that up to 90 days. And there were some other advantages to this per device licensing model as well. Now, however, we thought that this is a really good, compelling offer. And what really happened is that not a lot of customers ended up using it. Sure, people complained about this code term thing about this licenses starting ticking, but we just saw over and over that actually per device licensing is not much used. So we're now moving on to a third licensing model instead, which is the subscription licensing, which just gives much more flexibility, both in terms of how you arrange the devices and licenses, but also how you do your payments. And it's the subscription one makes a lot of sense from the business side for a lot of customers. And it's the one that we now envision that a lot of customers will be moving to eventually. It doesn't make sense for us to keep 3 licensing models. That is just too much. So we don't encourage the per device licensing model anymore. If you are on per device licensing, that is fine and you can stay on there. We're still working out and figuring out what the best transition will be to one of the 2 other ones, but there's no need to panic at all. You can continue using it as it is, and once the renewal comes, you can have a discussion with your account manager about whether you're going to stay on per device licensing or want to transition to either code term or subscription licensing. Probably subscription licensing more likely. So just to summarize this, because it is quite complicated, unfortunately, but hopefully you understand the history of it and why we got here. We had co-termination licensing. The default licensing is still there. A lot of customers will continue to use it. We will see what are some of the features of co-termination licensing. And we now have subscription licenses which you can choose to migrate to if you're on co-term. Per device licensing, I'm not going to focus on it anymore in this session. If you are on it, that is fine. It's just not something that we will be pushing for in the future, and we will probably have a way for you to migrate to either co-term or subscription, most likely. Okay, so the co-term licensing which is staying and which you have an option of staying on if it is what you prefer. But although there's this issue with when the license starts burning, people still really like co-term, as we have seen it. And I think it is because of how simple it is. It enables you to have all of your devices expiring on the same day, regardless of when you added those devices and regardless when you purchase the licenses. And this makes no sense when I say this, but you will see on the next slide why that happens. The entire organization is deactivated if you get out of the compliance. So that's an important thing to know about co-term. So if the licenses expire for your organization, there's a 30-day grace period where everything continues to function as normal. But after the 30 days, all of the organization is deactivated. The devices will continue forwarding traffic, but you will not be able to make any configuration changes. But the 30-day grace period gives you a good good window to sort your licensing out in the meantime. Okay, so how the co-term licensing works. This is I said that regardless of when you purchase devices and how many and at what time, and even if it was at different times, and even the licenses of different lengths, somehow all of your devices in organization will be expiring on the same day. And this happens because we do this averaging of time across all of the devices in your organization. Now, I here have a really, really simple example, the simplest example possible to explain to you what is actually happening. So let's say that in January, you buy 10 access points and you choose to buy a 1-year Meraki license. So you have 10 access points, lasts for 12 months. You move on, and 6 months down the line, you decide to buy another 10 access points and get another 10 another 10 licenses, which are a year long. So in if we were not doing this averaging, what would happen is that you would have 10 access points which would expire in December and another 10 which would expire in June. So we don't actually want that, and we don't do that on current Coterm. And instead of keeping track of these two separate sets of the devices, we say, actually, you know what? You have 20 licenses in total, and we're going to average this time that you have left to give you one expiry time for all of the 20 access points. So what you will get is the 20 access points which expire not in December as the first batch, not in June as the second batch, but in the middle of it, which is in March. And if you look at this kind of figure here, which is showing you that time, what really happens is that we take some of the time of the new license and move it over to the old devices. So that kind of part of the time kind of drops over to here, and you have a single expiration date for all of these devices. Now, this is the simplest possible example that I could have given you. Access points all have one single license, regardless of the model. So you can see that this gets more complicated as you have switches of different sizes, you have security appliances of different sizes. This averaging will happen across everything. So if you buy some access points and you already have switches, time from access points will go to the switches as well. This is all weighted based on the pricing. So obviously the time of an MX450, which has quite an expensive license, will be much more rated than a license of a Meraki sensor, which is, I think, the cheapest license that we have. There is a Meraki, if you Google Meraki license calculator, there's an online tool which you can use to add what are the devices that you currently have and what's the expiration date and what you're thinking of adding, and then the tool will calculate a new expiration date for you. So it's a bit complicated, but but people seem to really enjoy the fact that you actually don't have to worry about having different devices expire at different times. And that kind of came as a surprise to us as well. And we kind of saw that from people not being particularly keen to move to something where, this is not the case. So with that overview of Coterm licensing, which most of you are on, which is still a default, we'll now move on to the Meraki subscription licensing, which is a new licensing model that we have. The idea of this licensing model is to give flexibility, simplicity, and scalability. In this particular model, what we do is in a way similar. We group a group of the devices and we add a subscription to them. So a subscription is a group of licenses that are bound to the same terms. So the same terms especially means the same expiry dates. You can add licenses and upgrade as needed as well. So we have a bit decoupled this idea with the subscription licensing of when the expiry date and the amount of hardware. So there is now a bit more flexibility. With the Coterm, it was a bit difficult to figure out where things will land. But here we actually have more flexibility, and you can say, okay, I just want to add some of the devices without changing my end date for this group. Or I want just to expand the time for my licenses and stay the amount of hardware the same. So you have both options here. So you can add licenses or you can change the end date without affecting the number of licenses either. Now here you can see that in this example we have only one group, but actually you now can choose to have more than single group within the subscription. So it's kind of like where in a Coterm, if you're in an organization, all of the licenses have to be in this one single bundle, one single group. You can now divide licenses and devices into different licensing groups if you wish to do so. In the simplest way, in a way, we still enable you to run this in a very simple way where you have everything in a single group. You just care about one term, quote, one date where it's ending, and that's it. But there are situations in which this is not appropriate. and where, for example, if you may have different budgeting needs, maybe if you have organization which span, multiple continents, if you have different billing departments, for example, for different parts of your business, then this idea of having one organization where all of the licenses are kind of bundled together can be an issue. So instead, you do have an option of having more than one subscription group. Okay. So that kind of enables you to budget a bit more easily, have a bit more predictable expenses, and have subscription autonomy there as well. We'll see that you also can do things like static end dates and mixed feature tier environments as well, which we will talk about in a second. This will enable a bit more predictable cash flow, a bit more of a flexibility with the operations, and a bit of a simplified license management as well. There are some caveats about subscription eligibility. In order to start the subscription licensing, you can either do it on a brand new organization or on an organization where the licenses have expired. So if you're currently on the co-term and you wish to move over to subscription, you need to wait for your co-term date to expire, and then you can move over to the subscription licensing, and we'll see how in a second. With the hardware, all of the hardware is supported. There are some exclusions around the regions. So for example, Russia, Belarus, India, China are not currently included. Some of the benefits is that you do have a bit of an easier manage with the subscription keys. You do need to claim a subscription key only once, and there's an option of auto renewal where you don't need to then keep claiming subscription keys later on. There's a flexibility where it's a bit easier to know your predictable dates of expiry. Now, this is a really important one, which is flexibility payments. And this is kind of why we're calling this subscription licensing in the first place. There is now options to do different payment methods and to pay for your Meraki services monthly, quarterly, yearly, or all upfront. Now, a caveat to this is that all of the purchases do go through partners. So Meraki does not sell directly hardware or licenses, same as the rest of the Cisco, and you continue to work with a partner. So we have enabled this monthly payments to be processed, but whether that is available actually depends on the partner that you're using. There are some partners which have not agreed to the monthly payment plans yet, but there are many who have. So you'll have to talk to your account manager and the partner to see if monthly, quarterly, yearly is available in your particular case. Another really important one is that we have simplified some of the license queues. You don't really care too much about that because you're not ordering the license, or you will get your get your bill of materials with SKUs, but it's something that your partner will care more about. What you will care more about is that there's less of different types of licenses. And that means that some of the license management is a bit easier, and we'll see what of those licenses have been bundled together. Now, the claiming is only done once in the lifetime of a subscription, and that is done by only this one subscription order claim number. And once that is done, you're set, and that includes all of the licenses that you have purchased. If you, during the time that the subscription is running, have to make any changes, you can do that. All of the changes you do need to talk to a partner about, but the partner will be able to work with you on either adding new devices without changing the end date of the licenses, or also changing the end date to a further date if you wish to do so. So it's easy to add licenses to scale up if you need to, easy to upgrade licenses, or to extend the subscription as well. Now, this is a bit confusing with these kind of timings as well, right? Because we're used to choosing what is when you purchase the licenses on co-term or per device licensing, we were used to knowing how how long the licenses are for effectively. So you always have to choose 1, 3, 5-year license. Here with the subscription license, you can still choose a particular term, but then you can choose to auto-renew. And if you do choose to auto-renew, then that kind of happens for you automatically and you don't have to worry until you make some changes. But auto-renew feature is optional and we'll see a bit more about that later on. So flexible payments. So there is periodic payment options for monthly, quarterly, annual, or prepay. So you can still choose, for example, to buy a 10-year license and prepay for it if that's what you want to do. There is a flexibility in terms. You can choose any monthly term between 12 and 120 months. So not set 1, 3, 5, 10 years. You can actually choose 13, 14 months if you wish to choose that. And then within that, you choose your annual payment plan, if that makes sense. So an example would be, okay, I'm going to choose to do a 24-month license. I'm going to choose to pay it monthly, and I will not select auto renewal. That means that I will have to then, after my 24 months, talk to my partner and do a new purchase. If I enable auto renewal, everything stays the same, but after 24 months, I get an automatic renewal for another year unless I actively reach out to the partner to change something. Flexible start date is available. This is a big difference from coterm, is that you can request for the subscription to start up to 90 days in the future. You can include licenses of all different Meraki products into the same subscription, and you can also include different licensing tiers. So licensing tiers, on some products, there are some features which are divided into different licensing tiers, and you can choose effectively. You can actually have some of your devices running one tier and others running another. However, a single product, all of the devices in a single product family within a single network need to run the same tier, okay? So maybe you will have some switches which will be running essential in your network 1, but then you have switches in network 2 which will be running an advantage license. But if you do want to have these different switches and different licenses, they need to be divided within the different networks. With the subscription license, we are also simplifying some of the SKUs. And this is what I was telling you before, that what this means for you is that actually there is a less of a different types of licenses available. So before, in the switches in particular, we used to have a separate license for every single switch type. So for example, MS350, MS390 would have a different license. What we have decided to do now is to group these. So we have MS100 licenses, which are large, medium, and small, MS200, which are large, medium, and so forth, and the same for MS300 and MS400. So it's a bit simplified in terms of the number of different licenses. That does also mean that you can use, it's the same license for MS410 and 450, so you can kind of interchange these as well. This simplification has also happened across the MX security appliance product line. So rather than having individual license types for each different model, we now have these 5 different license groups: Z, MXS, ML, and XL, and again, interchangeable between models in these groups. And the same has happened for the MG as well, where we previously have licenses for every model. We now have a single MG license. The remaining licenses, which are MT, MV, and MR for hardware, they have not changed. They were a single license regardless of model before as well. Now, I also want to talk to you about the licensing tier as well, because there have been some changes on the licensing tiers too. This is how the coterm tier licenses look like. So this is for co-termination. It is also for further device licensing as well. But we used to have these are the only hardwares which have different tiers. That's the MS, MX, and MR. MS and MR had 2 different tiers, which we used to call Enterprise and Advanced, where the MX had effectively 3 different ones. Now, this has been changed, and effectively here, the enterprise and advanced security license tiers have been combined into a single tier. So this is kind of how the tier licensing looks like now. They have also been renamed for the names to be more in line with what we see on the Catalyst side. So we now call these tiers Essential and Advantage. And so the Essential, for example, will give you all of the switching features, but the Advantage licensing will add adaptive policy and extend the routing table for supported models. Essential license now includes both the basic SD-WAN features, but all next generation firewall features, UTM as well. And then the Advantage license includes Meraki, Insight, adaptive policy, ThousandEyes integration as the internet. Essential on the MR, all the wireless features, and then the Advantage will add the support for advanced policy as well as the umbrella DNS security integration. And this is the umbrella DNS security included with the Advantage license. There is a full integration for which you need to have a full umbrella license as well, which then gives you a full set of features. This is a DNS umbrella security only on the MR. That's a side note, a bit outside of this topic. So a bit of a simplification here as well, always just 2 levels. Now, I do have another caveat here. Now, as you have seen here, the Advantage license includes Meraki Insight. Meraki Insight was also included with the Secure SD-WAN license on the previous licensing model. Meraki Insight is it's a Meraki tool which is used for active application analytics. So it's a tool that if you have a license for, the MX will actively analyze the traffic as it is going through it, and then give you information about the application performance, help you figure out where any potential issue are arising from within the application, whether that's within your network, whether that's with the SP, or whether it is with the server provider of the application. Now, Meraki Insight, this is a side note again, does work really well in a conjunction with ThousandEyes, which we do have support for as well. You can run a ThousandEyes agent on the MI. ThousandEyes runs active probing. So where Meraki Insight will do passive analysis of traffic, ThousandEyes will do active probing. So these two work really well together. But talking about licensing here, so there's no change in the fact that this higher tier license includes Meraki Insight. Now, what is different is that we used to have a separate Meraki Insight license, which was standalone. So effectively, under Coterm, there were 2 different ways of consuming Meraki Insight. You could either get enterprise level tier or advanced security tier, and then get an add-on Meraki Insight license. Or you could have the Secure SD-WAN Plus tier, which has Meraki Insight bundle within it. Now, this is already complicated, I think, and Meraki has agreed. So Meraki Insight standalone license does not exist going forward with the subscription licensing. Instead, the only way to consume Meraki Insight now is with the Advantage license with the MX. There's a question. Meraki subscription licensing would be like having different groups on Coterm licensing where each group share the same license and term date. This is from Andres. Thank you, Andres, so much for this question. This is exactly, this is a very good way of understanding it. It's kind of like having an option to have something very similar to Coterm, or if you wish, have multiple groups where within one organization you have kind of different Coterm groups. It's a good way to think about it. But the additional benefits of Coterm of these licenses as well with the subscription licensing is this kind of payments and auto renewals as well, which is which is a separate issue, right? With kind of which can help with how you organize your finances, I guess. We are still, of course, enforcing the licenses. The 30 grace period still exists. If you are out of compliance, what would happen is that that particular device that is out of the compliance, the last one that you added to your organization, that device only will be affected by the shutdown, okay? In the co-term licensing, even if you just have a single device which is not licensed, everything in your organization would be affected, whilst on subscription licensing, that is not the case. Only the unlicensed device will be affected. And we spoke about this already a bit. There's two different ways to approach renewals. You can choose to have auto renewals or manual renewals. Either way, this is something that you discuss with your partner. And if you wish to do it, they can set it up for you. You choose the initial term, and that can be between 12 to 120 months. And then if you do choose the auto renewal, at the end of that expiration period, it will auto renew for another year with the same terms that you currently have. People may choose to do manual renewals instead because maybe you want to kind of have a look and maybe discuss again whether you need to discuss discounts again or any of those stuff. Then maybe manual renewals is the right way to do it. The auto renewal would carry over all of the exactly the same terms that you had before, including the discounts that you have had. So if you are interested into moving to subscription licensing, this is kind of the timeline that you should follow. T0 is the time where your code term expires. About 4 months before, in theory, you should, and your account manager should reach out to you or the partner and have a discussion with you about the subscription licensing, the benefits, and have a chat whether this is the right model for you or not, and whether you're interested to transition or no. About 2 months before, you really want to start getting your order all sorted and making the order so that then you get that license key for the subscription. Now, the license subscription key, if you're on Coterm, you actually cannot apply it until your license expires. So if you try to add a license key of a subscription license to a co-term organization, it will tell you that you're trying to add a an incorrect license effectively. So actually what you need to do is you actually have to let your license expire. And that's fine because you have a 30-day grace period. And then at T0 plus 1 is when you can claim your new subscription license. And with that, you will be automatically switched over to the new model. Now, for per device licensing, the complication really comes from the fact with the per device licensing, you can have different expiration dates for different parts of your network. And the issue is that all of them need to expire so that you can then claim the subscription license. Now this can be a bit tricky, and we're still figuring out what is the best way to get this to get this transition plan for per device licensing. So kind of stay tuned for that. There are some workarounds which involve purchases of one-day licenses so that you effectively get all of the licenses to expire on the same day. It's not very pretty, I think, at the moment, but the accounting will help you to do that if there's a particular need to get it done. But we're still working on trying to figure out a bit of a more elegant way to move from PDL over. So stay tuned for that. And so to kind of summarize all of this together, the subscription licensing features. So we have periodic payment options, monthly, quarterly, annually, or prepaid. More flexibility in terms of the monthly in the initial term, which can be anything between 12 to 120 months. End date is optional because you can have auto renewal. A start date is flexible as well, which up to 90 days delay. And you can have inclusive licensing, which means that everything is in the single bundle there for you. Cool. If there's any more questions, do pop them into the Q&A. I want to quickly show you how this looks like in dashboard as well. And I'm gonna move here first into this organization where, well, I have a couple of networks, but I just wanna, I'm pretty sure that most of you will know this. If you go under organization, license info, this is, and this is, this is how the coterm licensing looks like. And this is actually a new version, but the old version that you may be more used to is something that looked like this. And this really took me by surprise because I actually really think that this has been changed today because I was trying this yesterday and I don't think this inventory was the same at all. So I think there was like a change of like how inventory and license info looks for subscription licensing as well. So it got me a bit by surprise. But here's the license info that you see here. The so you can see here that the license model is co-termination. License status is okay, so that means that I have all of the licenses count correctly, and I have a single expiration date for all of my network. Now notice here as well that I had to make a choice for which license tier I'm using for the MX and MR, and I had to choose one for all of my organizations, so I didn't have the option to kind of mix between different ones. These are just the counters. We have like incredibly high counters here, but if you were to add a device that you're not licensed for, then you would be out of license compliance, immediately get into a grace period and have 30 days to either remove that device or add the additional license. Now, if I move over to my other organization, this one has the subscription and license info here instead. And here you can see that I actually have I had two different subscription groups. I actually chose to cancel one of those. So this is a pretty simple case, right? Where I only have one group. And within this one group, I have chosen to add all of my networks. So if I click on networks here, I will see that all of the networks are in my single sub branch subscription name. Now, if I wanted to add an additional group, I can do that and add the networks into it. So if I wanted some way to manage these differently, that is absolutely fine. And I could do that. Now, I also have something that is out of compliance. We'll see in a second what that is. So if I click on my sub branch, now, the one thing that I really want to point out to you here is this part here with the details. Whenever you want something changed to your license, you still need to go work with a partner. So a partner can help you to either add new devices or to change the expiry date or to enable or disable auto renewal. The information that the partner will need to do that is the subscription ID, which you get here. So this is what the partner will be asking you for. Here you can see the subscription utilizations across all of the networks as well. And I can click here on view details to see what is it that I am not having subscribed. So I can see that I have added two MS300 devices that should, well, two MS300 devices which will have the MS300 large device. The grace period is ending on October for these. So on October 6th, I will no longer be able to manage these devices. So I can export this information and then share with the partner as well there as well. And I want to close this as well. Now, and the other thing that I can do here as well is I can go across the different, the different product families, and I can see which of these devices I have or which of the licenses, what all of these licenses cover, which models, what is the usage of these licenses as well. And here in the switching, I actually can see that I'm using two additional ones, which I do not have. You can see the details here as well. I can see what other licenses I have, and that goes across all of the same. There is a question if I can move devices from one group to the other, and the subscription date of the group is recalculated. That is actually a really good question that I actually am not sure about. I think now, my assumption would be that you would probably need to get help from Meraki support in order to do that, because I don't think there's an easy way to do it yourself, but I'm not entirely sure. We do have a community page which we will share at the end. So I'll make sure to find this out for you and then add the question or add the proper answer for you in the community, and we'll share those afterwards. But that's a really good question I haven't thought about before. Okay, so that's everything that I wanted to share with you. Tanner, are there any more questions? One, actually, before I do that, there's one other question, one other thing that I do want to just quickly point out to. Cisco also offers enterprise agreements for purchases. Now, enterprise agreements are available for Meraki as well. And if you do choose an enterprise agreement coming soon, they will be using subscription license in the background. The enterprise agreement is a bit more over-encompassing because in an enterprise agreement, you can have, well, it's a purchasing agreement not for just one type of Cisco product, so not just for Meraki. So you could also there have Catalyst devices, WebEx, everything, right? So these are a bit more over-encompassing. So I just want to kind of leave you with that enterprise agreements are available for Meraki as well. If you're interested about that, talk to your account manager and they can take you through the Cisco enterprise agreements and what the benefits and are of those as well.
Yeah, I do have a couple questions for you here, Boris, and they are kind of on the licensing side of things that we talked about those last couple slides. How does Meraki handle licenses for organizations with a mix of old and new devices, and do I need to buy a separate subscription for each?
Well, that is absolutely fine. The devices, I mean, all new devices, they can all be within a subscription, regardless of it's a co-term or PDL or subscription. One question that does pop up is around end of support devices, which maybe is what this question is also referring to. So end of support devices continue to function. You do still do need to have them licensed. The license does include the RMA support as well. Like there's a guarantee to the license, right? Unfortunately, the guarantee and the RMA no longer are valid for end of support hardware. So there's that caveat. But if you are for some reason running end of support devices, you really do want to look at upgrading them, but they will run.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Can I transfer licenses between different organizations or subsidiaries?
So this is actually a really good point, a really good caveat of why if you have a need to move licenses between organizations, you may want to hold off from subscription licensing. And the reason is that we currently don't have a way of easily moving the licenses between different organizations on subscription licenses. There is something that is on the roadmap, but currently it is not possible. I'm sure there is a ways of like workarounds in exceptional circumstances, but for all intended purposes, moving licenses between organizational subscription licenses, currently it's not supported, but should be supported in the near future.
Beautiful, beautiful. What are the consequences of not renewing the licenses on time?
We spoke about this a couple of times. So there's a 30-day grace period. On co-term, if you just have one device that is out of compliance, everything will be affected. You won't be able to manage any of the devices. On subscription licensing, it will be just that one device or a few devices affected that you will not be able to manage after the 30-day grace period, which still exists.
What happens if Meraki changes its licensing structure during my active subscription term? Will I be forced to switch?
We haven't been forced. We haven't forced anyone to move from co-term, and that's why there's so many people on co-term still, and PDL partly because of that didn't take off. So it is fine if you don't want the hassle of moving. If the subscription license doesn't speak to you currently, we don't currently have an intent of moving people over. We will be encouraging people to move over, but we will not be mandating that anytime soon.
For me, on my end, that does it all for the Q&A at the moment. We'll leave this Q&A chat screen open if you do have a question here for Boris. Here's a question from Jerry. How is expiration managed if you have devices in different time zones, for example, EU, Asia, and US?
So that's a really good question. It will be so for the co-term licensing, I believe it will all be on UTC time that this will occur, if I'm not mistaken for that. But you really shouldn't get yourself in a in this trouble where you're really like running close to to being in that issue.
No, another good question though. If you have multiple devices, for sure. As we do wind down here, Boris, is there anything else that you would like to cover here before we do wrap up?
I don't think so. I hope that this was informative for you all. I do, one thing that I find, I am never, as a network engineer, this is not my favorite topic. I have to be honest with you, but it is an important topic. And with Meraki in particular, the reason why I really like Meraki is because of the simplicity that Meraki brings to the networking. And I do appreciate that having 3 different licensing models is kind of confusing. But I hope that you kind of understood why we got to this point historically, and that kind of is just kind of how things happened, and that there's been good reasons for these changes to occur, and there's a good reason for these transition periods that we're currently in, but there's 3 different licensing models. And going forward, in the right time, we will be looking to simplifying this so that we don't have to worry too much about all these different models as well.
I want to thank you, Boris, for your time today, and to all of our attendees as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and to the whole team for joining and bringing your knowledge to the Cisco community today. As mentioned, if you do have an additional question for Boris, we'll keep that Q&A window open for a couple more moments. For even more tutorials, demonstrations, and future webinars, please visit the Cisco Learning Network. I've placed a link in the chat screen for you. It is a post-webinar discussion thread for today's event. Includes some of the resources that Boris discussed, as well as options to catch today's recording. And then you can ask any follow-up questions on that thread about this session as well. Your feedback is important to us, and at this time, you'll be directed to a post-webinar survey. Please take a couple moments to participate in that. Helps us plan out some future sessions. Once again, we thank everybody for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Cisco Learning Network.